All right, so we're on to the front wall now. We're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to go 23 1/4, 47 1/4, 671 1/4, and then of course 8 feet. I pointed out earlier that on the 16-inch on center you have the red squares. Well, on the 2 foot on centers you have the little, of course, 2, 4. So, you just got to look for that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to lay out the door in the middle of this. So we're going to find the center of our board. One way you can do that, if you're not 100% sure, is you can make a number like 4 feet, and then you can measure from the other end 4 feet and see where the mark is between them. Like let's say it was 95 inches instead of 96. If you did that, your marks will end up an inch apart and you can put a mark in the center. We know in this case the board's exactly 8 feet. So we're going to mark the center at 4 feet. So we make a straight line and we put a C over the line to show center. We're going to use a 36-inch door. So on a standard pre-hung door for an exterior of a building, the doors are going to be like 32, 36, or you may hear them called 3.0 by 6'8". And a 3.0 is 3 foot 0 inches. 6'8 is 6 foot 8 inches tall. So on that 36-inch door, we want to add 2.5 inches wide and 2.5 inches tall for a rough opening. So our finished opening in this wall before the door goes in wants to be 38.5 by 6 foot 10.5. And we're going to go 19 1/4 from the center mark. And that's going to be the edge of our door. We're going to go 38.5 the other way. And that's going to be the edge of our door. Now what I like to do is I like to turn my tape around and make sure I get the same numbers, right? So I've got 19 1/4 to my center mark and 38.5. So that's the actual opening for the door. So now what we have to do is we have to lay out 3 inches on each side and 1.5 inches. So from the edge of the door we go 1.5 inches and 3 inches. We do the same thing over here. Okay, so now we're going to lay the wall out with our speed square. And Sue can bring you on in here. We do the same zeros to start on our left hand side. Now this is our stud right here, but we're going to lay our door out first. So our door has actually 2 pieces of wood, 2 studs if you will. One of them is not actually called a stud. So this is the door. This has a jack right here and then a stud beside the jack, and we'll show you what those are in a minute. Now because of the framing here, we're actually supposed to have another stud right here. And you'll notice there's only about 1 inch in between there. Again, because this is just a storage building for powerhouse equipment, we're going to get vinyl siding on the outside. I'm not going to put that stud in because it's just a waste of $7 or $8 right now, and it's so close, the interior framing will span that. So we're going to come down here. We're going to do the same thing. And this is the jack again, and this is the stud. And you'll notice the same thing down here. So we're going to skip this one too. Now the one thing we do have to do, we want to lay this out here for a stud up at the top, because as we build this door, we're going to have a header, and then we're going to have a little short stud above the header in the top plate. So we're going to go ahead and set these over there on the floor. And we're going to cut 1, 2, 3, 4 studs. Now you remember before we said we wanted the wall 8 feet tall. So we have to subtract that same 3 inches for plates. And we want to crown our studs. And then we want to measure 96 inches minus 3. So 93 inches. 93 inches. All right, we're going to go ahead and fast forward a little bit, speed up the video, time lapse it here so you don't have to listen to me ramble while we do repetitive parts. But we'll slow down here in a minute and show you how to frame in the door. Okay, so now remember on the door, we talked about the opening being 2.5 inches bigger either way. So a common door is a 3.068, if you will. So we're going to make that 6'10.5" for the framing, which is 82.5. And then we're going to subtract 1.5 inches for the bottom plate. So we're going to end up with an 81-inch tall jack. Now you want to check with the door manufacturer, wherever you're getting your door, your lumber yard, and find out what their rough opening is. That's just a rule of thumb. They had 2.5 inches each way. Some doors are more, some are less, so you want to make it to match your door. And this is what we call jack studs. So they go in, one on either side of the door, and their whole purpose is to hold up the header, to transfer the load of the header down to the floor system. So I'm going to put that in there. And nail them about every 16 inches. And then you can just work them up and down to get them to line up. And then we're going to measure our header. 41 3/8. Now if you were doing something with a big roof, a longer header, when you do this, typically your header would be, maybe a 2x6 doubled up, laid on flat, a 2x8 doubled up, laid on flat. You can put a piece of plywood in the middle and it'll get you the same thickness as a 2x4 wall. We're actually just going to lay our 2x4 down because there's not really any load to speak of here, and it's a fairly small hole. The other rule of thumb I have is if the opening is larger than 8 feet, I use 2 jacks on either side instead of 1 to transfer that header load down through. And here's an interesting tidbit of information for those not familiar with skill saw. My mark is right here in the middle. If I just tried to cut this, the skill saw is going to bind and kick back and possibly hurt me. What I want to do is I want to get this scrap wood hanging in free space, put my leg up against it, and then I can cut it like this. And then the piece falls off and there was no binding. So if you've heard somebody cut like that, you'll hear the saw like grind and jump and bang, and that's because they're binding their work. Now we're going to cut 1 stud to go in the middle, and it wants to be 10 3/8 to the long point. And we happen to have one here with the angle cut on it. So we're going to go ahead and put this up here for a workstation. And we're going to measure from the long point down 10 3/8. Put that in there just like that. All right, now while we got you right here, let me set this nail gun down out of the way. That was how we framed up a door. But if that happened to be a window, it's the same process. You get the top where you want it. You measure down for the rough opening of your door like this, your window. You mark your top, bottom of your rough opening. And then what we do is we subtract 1.5 inches and we put what we call a cripple stud under either side. And then we cut a plate to set in there to go crossed. And we put our stud in on our framing centers for our plywood. And that's how we'd frame in a window. So it's basically all the same process, just the door is minus the bottom 3 or 4 pieces. So we're gonna get you set up somewhere so you can watch this in a time lapse. We're gonna frame the rest of the walls, and then we'll come back and slow down and explain to you how to put on the plywood.